So now that we have our cylinder pretty much done, I'm just gonna switch back here to that regular material mode, and I want to go here into our left orthographic view. And now let's continue with this cylindrical element that also belongs to the cylinder. So I'm gonna have this here put to 0.3 radius. I'm gonna rotate it 90 degrees, and we can put the depth to 5 centimeter. So that way this already comes out here with the right size based on the reference image that we have there. And now let's go to our edit mode. And here at the end of this thing, we can give it a bit of a bevel here. I'm gonna follow this with an inset and then extrude to the inside. This is what we have on the reference images. And now here on that side, let's also select our vertex points. And then with our move tool, we can drag it further out here. And maybe we make it so that it sticks out a little bit here on this element. And we want to give it another inset, followed by another extrude. And that one we also gonna give a bevel and then do another inset, press M and collapse. So now we have some more elements here on that, and we can use our loop cut tool to put some edge loops here already in place. So let's also have another one here. We can go in the X-ray mode for that. And now what we're gonna do is ring selections for these two here. And now as a face selection, if we press I and Control at the same time, we can drag it up here like that. So in that way, it's almost like we did an extrude, but just a different way of doing it. So now that we have that, the next thing I want to be working on is our rail. And the reason for that is that we already know, once we have the rail, the size here for the rest of the barrel. Based on this image that we have here, it's exactly the same width. And I found some more information here for these rails. These are the numbers that we have, and I also added them here to our reference image so that we can be as precise as possible. So I'm just gonna hide everything here aside from our reference image for that. And I wanna be putting this back to millimeters so that we have more precision based on some of these smaller numbers there. So we're gonna start by just having a box here with 21.2 millimeter based on this reference image. And you can see we have a height of 9.32. And we can add this here to our transform properties. So right now we're just trying to get one of these teeth here worked on. For that we need to put Y to 10 millimeters according to our reference image. And now when we look at it in the viewport, we already sort of have the proper dimension here for one of these elements. And now what we have to do is create a secondary cube. And you can see it comes in with 21.2 millimeters as we had it before. But then for our Y dimension, we're gonna put it to 5.25. So we also have to consider the width for this one. And this is 15.67 here for this element, and that goes into our X dimension here. So let's just take our time as we do that to make sure that we got that right. And now it should look like this here on your end. So it's a bit mysterious so far, but you will see in just a moment why we do that. So now we can take another look here and we see that this here is 5.54 millimeters, and we're gonna then use this box here basically for this part of the element. So let's put that here to our Z dimensions for it. And right now you might wonder, what are we doing? You'll be seeing it in just a moment. I'm gonna subdivide this here. And I want to be doing the same thing here for that. Ring selection, subdivide, and now what we can do with this box is to snap it. Hey guys, this is me from the future, and I just wanted to show you how to snap this object without this CAD transform plugin, in case somehow this plugin won't get supported anymore, and also because we're not making much use of it throughout the tutorial. So I just wanted to make this sort of like future-proof and show you how to do it without. So first of all, over here we have our snapping options. So by putting this magnet on, we enable the snapping, and then you want to put it to vertex. And you can see the rest of my settings. These are default. And now what's important is that we don't want to be using these arrows here, but you want to click here or select this red cube here. So then we take it like that, and you can then snap it over here to that vertex. Now we let go of it, and we actually want it to be here. So we just do that again. And bam, there it is. So that is basically the way to do that without this CAD transform plugin. And that is just me telling you, if you have problems with the CAD transform, you can also simply do it like that. The snapping is not perfect yet. I wish it was a bit more convenient. And that's why I have this CAD transform plugin, because it behaves a bit more like 3D Max. So I hope that was helpful, and now we can continue. We're gonna make use of this CAD snapping tool, this plugin. And if you hover over one of these vertex points, you can then just drag it onto that other box here. And that way it's perfectly in place. Now we're gonna go over here to our transparency view, and then with the loop cut, we can enable snapping, and we're gonna put it to edge mode. So what that enables us to do is now cut these loops here and snap it to the box that we have in the background. So we're gonna do that here for these segments where previously we did the subdivision through. And then here on the left view, let's also do the same thing. Let me get back here to the loop cut, and then we're gonna snap it here to this part. So now we have quite a few cuts here in that bigger box, and that basically makes sure that we have the dimensions properly in place. So let's go back here to this element. I wanna delete this particular edge loop that we have there. And then let's put the Z dimension to 3 mm. And this here, let's put it all the way out. So let's put it to 40. As long as it's sticking out basically. Now I'm gonna use this CAD tool once more for precise snapping. And I wanna snap it here like this. The reason is that we're gonna make use of that as a Boolean. And now what we can do is also get rid of this edge here, the ones that we created earlier. And also I want to delete these faces here. So we're just going to focus on one side. I'm going to fill that back up here, pressing F, and then join these two vertex points together. And now what we can do is select this edge and dissolve it. Same here. And you can see how we're already getting here with our shape now. It becomes a bit more clear, all the mystery. And I'm gonna drag this out here like that. I'm gonna disable the snapping, or else it can sometimes produce weird results. And now we're just gonna drag it out like this here. And that enables us then to use this as a Boolean operator, for which we're gonna select it and put it to difference. So you can see we have this segment of it now, and we can then apply the Boolean. And now our smoothing groups need to be auto-smoothed. I'm gonna put it down here to something like a 20% angle. That way we really catch everything. So now we're gonna make use of the cut tool. And we wanna press C for the angle constraint. And now we press Z to cut through everything. That means it cuts also here on these sides. And this is important because we want to have these edges here in place. And these ones here, we can dissolve them, the ones on top. So now let's also dissolve these edges here. And now, because we already have it on one side, we're just going to delete everything on the other side. And let's just prepare that here as well. I'm going to delete these faces. And here's still a vertex point, which I'm gonna individually also dissolve. So that way we already have like one of these tiles here that we can then work with. But first we also gotta delete these faces here on that side. So before we do the symmetry on that, we gotta also connect these two vertex points here. And now let's count it to make sure we get that right. And as the next thing, we're gonna use array. And we only wanna be using it here for the offset Y. So that makes a perfect copy of it. And we're gonna have it 9 times here. Then we close it, which means we still have the modifiers in place here. And now we're gonna make use of the mirror modifier from the JMesh tool, or you can apply it through the modifiers, but this one's still available on JMesh. So as you can see, that already gives us our shape here for the rail. So now, while we still have these individual pieces as instances, I'm gonna snap here into that frontal view. And once again, I'm gonna use the cut tool and press C for angle constraint to get some extra support edge through here. So as the next thing, let's also do some more cleanup here in terms of connecting that. And you can see, because it's instance based, it's doing it for all the other pieces too, and also on the other side. Now I'm gonna apply these modifiers. And what I wanna do is delete that center edge loop. But as you can see, we haven't welded it yet. So what we got to do first is select everything, merge by distance. In my case, 64 vertices are being merged. And now we can get rid of this center edge loop by simply selecting it all the way through and dissolving it. So we can do the same thing here at the bottom. And we're gonna do more optimizing later, but for the moment we're still work in progress here with it. But what we can do is now push it up here according to our reference image. And it looks like it already fits quite well there. So I'm gonna leave it here in that position. And now we can work here on the end and the front part of it. So let's carry on here. I'm gonna make a face selection here on that. And we still need to fill this segment here as well. And that way we can extrude it. But we can also delete these edges here, or I should say dissolve. So now let's select this, and I'm gonna extrude, right mouse button to snap it back, and then drag it out on the Y-axis. And I'm gonna do it for one more segment. So here's the thing, I want to show you something. When we select these two vertex points in transparency mode, you can see that it also selects them on that side. But now if we want to join that, you see that we get an error message. So the way that we can do that is to go to vertex and connect vertex pairs. So as you can see, that actually does the job instead of connect vertex path. And there's really no reason why we should not just replace the shortcuts for it. So I'm gonna go to our key mapping. Let's search for connect, and the one here that we don't wanna have for it, I'm gonna disable. And then we come back here to that one, right click on it and say assign shortcut and press J. So now we can simply do that on both our sides without getting this error message, and that will save us quite a bit of time. So the next thing I want to do is connect these two vertex points, and now we're going to make a selection for this edge loop here and dissolve the edges, because we have to start working on our shape here for the frontal part of it. So while we are working on that, let's keep it simple. I'm going to go here to the frontal view, and I actually want to get rid of this particular edge loop here. And because we have the X-ray on, it goes through all of the segments. So let's dissolve them. And now we can take that piece as we have it and we make a copy of it. And then we want to rotate that around 180 degrees. And we basically just already put that in place here for once we get to work on these segments here where we also have this rail. So I'm just going to position it here. And then, of course, we can delete like a good chunk of it here. I have 5 of these segments that I'm just going to delete, and that leaves us here with this only. So I'm going to hide that part for now, but just to make sure that it's a separate element. So now let's concentrate here on the front side of this rail. I'm going to give this here an extra subdivision so that we have a bit more polygons to work with. And then here at the front, I'm going to scale it down like that. Now with that edge loop, we can also give it a bit of a scale here. So that way it looks like that, but from the top we want to make it a bit more of a curve. So that way we already have a bit more of a round shape here in place. And now we're going to keep it like a bit low poly in the beginning so that we can then easier get these vertex points here into place. This one I'm going to push to the right, and then for these we can drag it down like this here. So now it might also be useful to look at that rail from the top perspective. I'm gonna make an instance copy with Alt and D. So Alt and D makes an instance out of it, not a copy. And now we can rotate that here and put it into the position where we see it here from the upper side. That way we can now work on both versions, and it will change it on both as well. So let's go and create a new cylinder here. And that cylinder, let's take a quick look here again at our reference. Let's put it to this cutout shape here, which has a radius of 5.08. And we want the depth to be, let's put it to like 150 millimeter, as long as it goes all the way through here. Now let's put that into position, and I'm just gonna zoom in here. I'm gonna make a vertex connection here in the center so that you can better see where I have that cylinder, but we're gonna make it more accurate later on. For now, let's just put that cylinder here into place like that. And now let's fill that segment here of the rail. But the reason is that now we can use this as a Boolean operator. So I'm gonna use JMesh again. So let's put that to difference, but we're not gonna apply it yet. We're just gonna leave this in there so that we already get a general idea for what it will look like later, as we also still look here at our reference image. And you can see that we have a bit of an angle there. So in order to get this kind of look, we have to get back here to this object, and that makes the Boolean disappear for as long as we work on it here, at least in the edit mode. And now we're gonna squeeze it like that so that this basically fits into the inside of the cylinder if you look at it from the front. Once we go back to object mode, we see what it looks like. And what we can also do is take this edge here and dissolve it. So then we connect it like that here. And now, because we made some changes here on the right side, let's just use the JMesh Quick Mirror tool once again to get that over to the left side in a fast way. So that way we have a quick way to copy everything from the right side over to the left basically. So I'm gonna continue by selecting these two edges and give them a bit of a curve here when you look at it from the top. So now let's just zoom out from time to time and compare with our reference image. And you can see that now if we look at it from the top, we now have this nice shape here that we wanted to have there. So let me push that out of the way and let's just hide that Boolean operator and compare it with our reference image. You can see we have a bit less space here on the picture, where right now it's a bit too wide here. So what I'm gonna do is I connect a few more edges so that way you can better see where I have this positioned as we pull that up here. And if we zoom in, it would make sense to push that further up. If we press Shift, we can do it very slowly so that these edges here are matching as close as possible. Later we're gonna weld it, so it doesn't have to be 100%, but let's aim for 99. So let's make that a bit more round here. And I'm gonna connect these two vertex points, and now I'm gonna make an edge loop here through this ring. Then let's select it and let's scale it a bit here on the x-axis so that this is more round. Next, I'm gonna select these faces and I want to align them horizontally. S, Z, and 0. And now let's just push it up and let's see what it looks like here with our Boolean operator. So the reason for that is that we have this intersection there, and by scaling it further into that cylinder, we can then get rid of it basically. So it takes a bit of fine-tuning and maybe it's not perfect yet. So let's take these vertex points and push it in a bit. And now we can go back here to this and we want to push them down as long as they stay sort of within that cylinder, if we look at it here like that. This is also why I have to hide the Boolean operator from time to time so that we better see what we're dealing with before we then commit the Boolean operation. So before we do the Boolean, let's also think about the back end of it. And for that, we're just gonna recycle what we created so far here at the front. Let's select these faces and then we wanna say Shift D, right mouse button to snap back, and then we drag it over here and rotate it around 180 degrees. So now what we have to do is we want to select these vertex points and delete it to free up some space, and also these faces here, we want to delete them. So that makes it then easier for us to merge these pieces together. And for that, let's also dissolve these edges here. And we can then connect it like that here on these two. And basically we just get it ready to onboard that piece that we have here. Let's also align that here and push it back. And now let's just put that piece in and give it a bit of a scale because it's not as long as the other one. So now we can take these points and just be as precise as possible. You can use Shift again. And now let's select everything and we're gonna merge by distance, and you can see that it merged 10 vertices on my end. So that means that all these points are now properly merged and welded, and maybe we want to rearrange that here a bit. I'm going to dissolve this and push that over to here. And since we're in transparency mode, we do it at the other side in the same time basically. So that way we basically saved us a lot of work simply by copying that over and changing it up a bit here. So let me unhide that cylinder again that we're using here, which we haven't actually applied yet. So that means we can still do work on the cylinder itself here, and in that case let's add some edges that gonna support these teeth here. Let's put the loop cut tool back on as well as our snapping, and we're gonna put it to edge mode, and now we can conveniently snap here to these individual edges where we want to have the connection then. So here's the first, and now we're just gonna do that all over the place. But basically this is a way where we can already add the edge connections and do it only on the Boolean operator, and then once we apply it, it's gonna basically get stamped into the final mesh. So we're just gonna connect these edges here. And sometimes the snapping can be a little bit strange in Blender, I find, especially from object to object, which is why I use this CAT plugin. But for something like that, it works very well. And I'm really liking these loop cut tools. It's a really nice feature. Maybe we can also add something here at the front, but on a second thought, actually we don't need it there. So let's go over here to that side and also finish it up here. Do some more snapping. And now we have all our loops in place, and now it will become more clear why we did that. So now let's apply, and here we get an error message because we have an instance up there. So let's go on that check mark and say apply to all objects. So now we did the Boolean, but if we look at it here in the edit mode, we still have that cylinder which we now can delete. So now let's select everything in vertex mode and merge by distance, which merges 65 vertex points here on my end. Just gonna double check here on these parts. And yes, we only have one vertex point left there. Let's get over here to that front view and delete one side entirely, the left side, so that we can concentrate on cleaning up only the other side, and then we simply mirror it over. So I'm gonna put some vertex connections here, and then we can go to these edges and dissolve them. And here we also want to connect it. And then these edges here, let's just get rid of them. Same as this here. And I'm just gonna also select these two vertex points and connect them. And same here for these edges. They don't really contribute much here to our edge flow. So they're only gonna cost us polygons, poly count, so we can delete them. And I guess it was a bit of a bad idea to have this instance up there. I thought we might need it, but it's not really the case. So I'm just gonna delete it. Now let's also clean up that side here. I'm gonna do the same thing that we did at the front, but now we're looking at it here at the back. Connect and dissolve some of these edges, and this one here, it looks also a little bit messy, so we can dissolve it. Here we can connect these points and then get rid of that one. We always want to make sure that we have straight connections without having any n-gons there. So speaking of n-gons, on these big faces here in the center, these ones, we actually do have quite a few of n-gons, and what we can do is connect them while being here in our X-ray mode, and we go into that front view. So now we're gonna select these vertex points here, and you can see how they go through everything. We have the selection applied throughout, and thanks to our connect vertex path shortcut, we can then just make a connection through all of it. That's why it was a good idea to set up that shortcut earlier for scenarios like that. Now let's do the same thing here. Another one where we can do that. I'm just gonna zoom out to show you where I have this, so you can compare it with your side. Same here. Let's do that once more. Also gonna press J, and then we're only missing this one where we can also do that. So now it's starting to look really good. So we can mirror it back here. And for that we make use here of this quick mirror function. I mean, we could also apply a regular mirror modifier, but it's just convenient having it available here with these quick buttons. And now let's take a look here at this element in the side view, and we can use these edges here to already have this in place for an extrusion if we select it here from the bottom. So with these faces here, what we can do is simply extrude it down, and that way we already have this shape here according to our reference image. And then we can select this edge loop and dissolve these edges, because all we have to do is have a connection up here. And remember, we're gonna do it on both sides. So let's join that. So now it's time to work on this here. For that, I want to copy our reference image, snap it back into place, and now we can go over here to our transform, rotate it around, and that way, if we push that over here, we can also put it at X0 already to get a head start. And then we're just gonna position it here so that it sort of like fits our view here where we have this piece. So we're looking at it here from the top perspective, and that way we get a much better idea where we have to put these screws. So now let's go over here. So we want to get started by adding like a cylinder here to that scene, because once again we're gonna make use of a Boolean operator then later on. So I'm gonna put it to 16 sides, and I already measured it. 4.2 millimeters seems to be the right radius here for that. And then the depth, we can put it for now to maybe 4 millimeter, but this is flexible. So as the next thing, we can then check whether this size fits, and you can see 4.2, it works great. Now what I want to do is select these faces here, and then we're gonna go to interactive tools and say quick origin. That puts the pivot point exactly to this spot, and now we're gonna select the cylinder, then the rail, press Shift S and say select onto active. So as you can see, this is how we can conveniently align something perfectly to precision. And now what we want to do is clean up that region here a bit. These edges that we put there earlier, we want to get rid of them here in these spaces. And by get rid of them, I mean dissolve them, because then we're gonna prepare this area here for the Boolean action. So now let's select this cylinder and let's go over to JMesh, and then we're gonna use this array tool on the y-axis. And I'm gonna put it to 1.2, and I have 4 repetitions of it, or item counts. So that way we have this perfectly aligned as well. And then let's collapse this array modifier here. So technically we only want to have the left and the right cylinder. So let's say Ctrl L here on that selection, separate it out, and then we can delete it. You will see why in a moment. This one here, let's also separate it out, but we're gonna keep it as a unique selection here that we can toggle on or off. We get back to that later. For now, we can also just hide it. So next thing, let's go to the top view and let's make a cut through here. So we have a perfect straight line, and now we can select this ring here and subdivide it. And we want to do the same thing here on these ones as well as this one, because we're gonna work on one of these tiles and then just copy it over once it's done. So next I go over here to the orthographic view and let's make a selection for these parts here. I'm gonna zoom in so you can make sure you have the same selection that I do. And also let's make sure that here on that side we have it like that. So with that selection, let's delete the faces. And the reason is that we're gonna simply work on this tile here and then copy it back over once we're done with it. So now let's use our JMesh tool here on that. We're gonna put it to difference. And now let's push it up a bit. Or actually, on a second thought, let's undo that. Ctrl Z. And now let's reactivate that other cylinder as well. And let's bring them up together. Even if we only have the Boolean applied to one of them yet. But that way we make sure we have the same height there. So then we can hide this cylinder at the front again. And let's get back here to this piece. I'm gonna grow the selection on it 2 times so that we already have these surrounding faces selected. And now let's go over here to the left view and let's also select the ones that we're still missing. So now with that selection, let's separate it so that we have this as a unique piece for now. And now let's give this here a scale on that particular face here. And now I want to use X and Y quick mirror function. So that way we now have these here in basically 4 tiles. And we can just get rid of 3 of them. So that we're only left with this one piece here. And that makes it much easier for us to clean up here and to optimize. So we're gonna make these vertex connections and then we dissolve these edges here. And then let's also take a look at this here. Maybe we can make another connection here. Actually, it's better when it comes from that direction. This way it follows the flow better. And here let's also make some connections so that we don't have an n-gon there. So here let's also connect that with J. And now we can make use again of the quick mirror. The first one here on X and now on -X. So that way, thanks to our pivot being there in the center, we get our complete piece back. And now that I think about it, let's also connect these vertex points here like that, so that we can get rid of this edge here in the center, which otherwise only contributes to unnecessary poly count. So we're gonna connect these vertex points like this here. And then we erase this one here. And we couldn't do that before because we had to first tile it over. So speaking of tiling, let's use the array modifier on the y-axis. And let's put it to 1 and close it like that here. And as you can see, it fits perfectly. So let's also enable this other piece that we have here. But before we work on that, let's collapse our array modifier here. And then let's select the other part of the rail together with this, and we press Ctrl J to join it. And now for this piece here, let's go over to our vertex mode. And then as usual, we're gonna merge everything together. So in that case, it says exactly 100 vertices merged. Just double check that everything looks okay. Maybe on your end, for whatever reason, it says 99 or 98. As long as it looks okay, I wouldn't be too worried about it. But I'm just mentioning it just in case. So now let's select this edge loop and let's dissolve it. That was only for earlier basically as a support edge loop. But now we can make another one here in preparation for this Boolean action that we're about to do here with that piece. So let's put that to difference. And that way we already get this shape here into place. We can then apply the Boolean. And now let's select this piece here. And let's also give it a bit of a scale like we have it on the other one. So this piece here, as you can see, it has a different shape on the sides as the other ones. That's why we have to work on it individually. I'm going to grow the selection here. Select some of these extra faces and separate it out so that now we can select this here. I'm going to use the quick mirror on the X, and that way we can now delete the right side of it. Gonna delete the vertices, and we can only work here on that side, and then we can just copy it over. Let's enable our vertex snapping, and then we're gonna go over here to our knife tool, and we wanna connect it like this here. So now we have these two vertex points that are very close by each other. Let's go to the interactive tools and click on target weld on. So that way we can now snap against it, and that is how we can do target welding here in Blender. This is the first time we do the target weld here in the tutorial, and basically it's just another way that we can merge vertices together. And in that case we just want to clean it up a bit, where basically before we had too many open ends, like here for example. So let's also merge that, same as on the other side, and join that here. So one thing not to forget is to toggle the target weld off. Let's click on that, and then you see at the top the snap icon turns gray again. This is important to remember. And then let's use the quick mirror here on the X-axis. Join everything together, and again we're gonna target weld. Well, not target weld, but weld everything globally here. So now we have this as one piece, and then we can get rid of these support loops that we were adding earlier, because those were only serving the function to make everything tileable here on these individual pieces. Let's hit Ctrl A and apply all transforms to rule out that we have any mismatch here with a scale or rotation. And now I'm gonna dissolve the vertices and in the edges here, because that makes it easier for us to select them. And then let's say Shift D, snap that selection back here. It's a copy, but we haven't separated it yet. Instead, we're gonna use the inset and then push it up like that here, followed by another inset. And now what we can do with that is select every second edge, and then we want to hit Shift, Control and Numpad plus, and the same here on these other screws, so that we have a selection that is lower poly than the one that we had before. And that way it looks according to our reference image. So let's do the same here. Then we're gonna collapse it. And now we can select these inner faces here. And we're gonna also do an inset on it. And if we press Ctrl at the same time, we can give it some depth. So that way they are all the same here. They all got the same treatment. And now let's go back here to that inner selection and we grow it. And now we can separate it out. So that way we have these screws here as separate elements as opposed to the rest of the rail. And here let's just go back to that rail and let's give it here an inset, and we're going to collapse it like that. So now let's go back here to these screws, and I want to have these inner faces here and also do the same thing here with that inset that we collapse to the center. So we can also select these loops here at the bottom, and let's just cap it, and I want to select it once more and give it an extrude down. Later we can delete these faces at the bottom, but for now let's leave it because it's gonna be useful for our high poly later. So next, remember we also had this rail here at the barrel. So it would be time now to think about how we best approach that. Let's take a good look here at our reference image. And then let's just consider this rail here done for now. Maybe we have to revisit it later again for some optimization. But now let's concentrate here on that part. So now let's go over here to our vertex mode. And we already have some vertex and edges here in place that perfectly fit that reference image. Let's put that vertex here back to the left. And now let's make a selection for this here and let's align it. S, Y, and 0 will align it here. Now let's take a look at it here at the front. And let's select these vertex points here and delete it. And I forgot this one here. Let's also delete that. That leaves us here with only this. And we can then bring that here more into that shape that we see there. So we have to consider that on the reference image, there is a bit of a depth, of course. So even if it may not look one-to-one the same what we're doing. So let's take a look at it from the front. And now let's use our quick mirror here on the x-axis. That gives us a cut straight through everything. And now let's go to vertex mode and we want to delete the left side here. It's always easier to work on one side first and then we can bring it back over to the other side. Let's also get rid of this face here, which right now we don't want to have there because we're still working on it here from our side perspective. And speaking of which, let's select these two vertex points and let's join them. And then we can dissolve that edge that we have here on the top. Because otherwise we have too many edges there. And that way we keep it simple here to the side for when we work on it. Let's delete these vertices here on top, also to keep it simple. So this current selection, we want to put it to the exact same place where these vertex points are. Let's go to Item and copy the X coordinates. And now we can select these vertex points and paste that in there. That way we perfectly have the same position here in place for it. And that gives us a head start where we can extrude upwards, snap back, and then drag it back up here on the Z-axis. So that way it's perfectly straight. And now let's select the edge here at the back of it. And let's also extrude it out here with D. Now another extrude, snap back, and then drag on the Y-axis. Now let's subdivide that here 3 times. And that enables us to give that a little bit of a curve here. So this one, let's push it up a bit. And you can see here, we gotta do a little bit of manual adjustment here on that. Maybe we wanna add another edge loop here. Only one. And that way we have a little bit more room here to get that curve shape in place. So let's just do a little bit of fine tuning on that. And then the normal map, or I should say the high poly, will make that really nice and smooth later on. So now same thing here. Let's select that edge. Let's drag it out with extrude, snap back, and then on the z-axis, according to a reference image, all the way down here. So now we have to find the right angle for that. And remember, we have this top view here, the reference image from earlier. So now we just gotta push it over to this other view. And it's not 100% perfect, but what we can do now is apply the mirror modifier here. And let's just hide that rail here as well as the screws so that we see better what we're doing. And now here on that piece, let's make sure that we have this edge here selected. And as you can see, thanks to the mirror modifier, it happens on both sides. And it's a bit difficult to see the distance. So what we want to do is add a cube. And we give that 7 millimeters. Because if we look at it here on the reference image, like this here, and undo it, you see this is pretty much the distance that it shows us. So let's put that back here so that this sort of matches, and then we can delete that cube. Doesn't have to be like 100% perfect, but that way we now have the right angle here on that. And now we can select that vertex point and push it perfectly over here to that corner. So it's quite a bit of trickery, but that way we have a nice angle on it here according to our reference images. So I want to also tessellate that a bit more here with some subdivisions, and then I'm gonna fill these edges here, select and press F to fill, and this here as well. If we use the Alt on one of these edges, we can make like a whole gap selection and then simply fill it. And now we're just going to connect these vertex points here like that. And of course, we have to add a little bit more here to that to get that curve right. So let's use the knife tool. And I'm going to cut somewhere over here. And this one I'm going to cut down here. So now, while we are in the left orthographic view, we can then arrange these vertex points according to our reference picture. Let's go back to the knife tool and let's add another one here. And then back to our vertex selection mode. We can drag that over here, and then let's have another one over here as well. So basically it's all about looking at that silhouette here of that curve, and right now it's a little bit too hard edged here on the top. So what I'm thinking to do here is add yet another one of these cuts so that we have a bit more wiggle room here. So now I think this looks about right here as far as these curves are concerned. And now in order to get the best result, I want to already work on this piece here, the inner side of the barrel, because that helps us to determine the rest of the barrel. So let's re-enable our elements that we were hiding earlier here. And if we look at this particular piece here, this is where the bullet comes through once it gets fired. So I want to make a copy of the inner part of it here and then separate that out, and let's give it the quick origin here so that we have that here available and we can work with it. So let's just align that SY0, and I wasn't in X-ray mode, so let's do that again. SY0 to align. And now with that piece here, let's just flip the normals on it. So now it's basically a cylinder that is perfectly aligned to the inner part of our cylinder. I mean the revolver cylinder. And if we fill these gaps here, we can now use that as the basis for the inner part of our barrel, which looks like that here, by the way. So let's add another cylinder now. And this one I want to be 7.5 millimeter. for the radius. Let's rotate it around 90 degrees. And according to the reference image, we need 127 millimeter. So with that, we have the perfect barrel size here for the length. Now let's align it. Shift S and selection to active. And let's just drag it so that it aligns here with the cylinder. So now we have this ring here, which is a separate part around the barrel. I mean the inner barrel. It can get a little bit confusing because it consists out of a few parts, but we wanna also add that now. I'm gonna have a radius of 9 millimeter. Let's also rotate it around at 90 degrees, and let's also align it here. So with that in place here, we can then switch over to our vertex mode, and let's bring that selection here to the left side. And then let's select these vertex points and let's give it a scale that is here in line with the part that we did on the outside. I'm gonna put an inset on that and collapse it. And I want to do the same here. So let's collapse that. And now what we can do with that is select this piece here. And we're gonna make a Boolean operation. So now let's use the JMesh tool on this piece, and we're gonna say difference. And now with delete after apply checked, if we apply it, obviously it's gonna delete that operator, but I'm gonna undo that and I wanna have this disabled. So now if we do that again, we get to keep that piece here, and we wanna put it to solid so that we can reuse it for our inner barrel. So this piece here, let's go to vertex mode. Let's select everything and let's weld by distance, because sometimes that Boolean doesn't really merge the vertex points properly together. So we have to do that manually. We're gonna fix the smoothing in a moment. But now let us select that front face here, and we want to give it an inset and then collapse that all the way to the center. And let's do the same thing here while we're at it. And now we can take this piece here, the inner part, and we want to select the middle part here and also give it the difference Boolean. So let's apply that. And this piece here, we don't need that. So we can go over and delete it. So that leaves us then here with that geometry. And now let's also select all the vertex points and once again merge it by distance.